Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars. You're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned your subscription. And for everyone else who's watching, if you enjoy this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. That's a great way to support my videos without having to spend any money. And if you'd like to help support the channel financially, you can visit eguitarplans.com. There's a link in the description below, or you can visit my Highline Guitars merch store, which is displayed below the description for this video. So what I'm going to be covering today is I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last episode, which was part 15 of the V-shaped guitar build. In that video, I had begun the process of assembling the guitar, and in this episode, part 16, I'm going to finish the assembly. And all of that is in preparation for what's going to happen in episode 17, which is the final setup. So without further ado, let's grab that guitar and get started. Before I could install the electronics, I had to thin the top where the gain booster switch is going to be mounted, because the threaded shaft for that switch is too short to extend up through the thicker top. So I just took my Dremel with a small router bit and then carved it down until I had the thickness appropriate for installing that switch. Of course, I wasn't going to leave that raw wood exposed, so I grabbed some of the same paint that I used to paint the guitar and I just brushed it in to coat and seal that portion of the wood. One thing I really like about the EMG system is it's very well engineered. Everything has been thought through and it all works extremely well. Furthermore, you don't have to solder anything. And when you purchase pickups, or even a set of pickups from EMG, it's going to come with the wiring diagram. And if you don't see the wiring diagram, you can also access those same diagrams on the internet. So if you were to buy these from a second hand, or you purchased a guitar that came equipped with the EMG system, you can access those wiring scenarios online, and they're very easy to follow, and it's really quick and easy to get everything installed. And the best thing is you have confidence that everything is going to work right and that you're not going to have a problem with bad solder joints, especially if you don't have a lot of experience soldering even very simple basic guitar electronics. One thing that I mentioned in an earlier video is the importance of having all your components on hand before you start to cut and carve any wood. And the reason for that is because you can lay everything out to make sure that all of your components, from the pickups to the bridge to the electronics, everything is going to fit together. And I found that that was extremely important in building this V-shaped guitar, because the amount of space I had to make cavities was limited by the shape of the guitar itself. So I had to lay everything out to arrange it in such a way as to make sure that I was going to have enough clearance and would get everything to fit. And even with that planning done, as I was actually putting this guitar together, I found that I had to rearrange a few things in order to get all the parts to fit exactly where I needed them to go. And that's evident here as I'm fitting the three-way toggle switch into the guitar, and then trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to place the control board for the EMG pickups. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but because I had those components before I started to actually build the guitar, I was able to get a pretty good idea that everything was going to fit. Then it was just a matter of dropping in the battery, hooking up everything, plugging it into an amplifier, and then just tapping the pickups as I do the different switch positions and play with the gain boost switch, which is going to be really cool. And of course, checking the volume and tone knob to make sure that they're working appropriately. As often happens when I build a guitar is I get really excited about cutting the body, the neck, the fretboard, gluing everything together, painting it, and doing all that, but I tend to forget two really important items: the covers for the control cavity as well as the tremolo spring cavity. So that's what I'm doing here. I just grabbed some 1/8" thick maple and cut those out with my CNC machine. Took about 3 minutes to do it. Then all I had to do was sand the surface pretty much the same way that I did the body and the neck, and apply a couple of coats of paint as well as a couple of coats of my clear. In a previous video I mentioned that there were some changes to this guitar, and one of those involved applying my logo to the headstock of the guitar, and because I couldn't inlay it at this stage, I decided to do a water transfer decal. And I'll do a video in the future about how I do this process because there are a lot of steps involved, and I didn't want to get into that in this episode. But once that was done, I proceeded to do some of the fretwork, and in this case it's going to involve grinding some fall off on those upper frets because I had a suspicion that there would be an issue there. And then what I did next was I sanded the back of the neck with progressively finer grits of sandpaper, starting with 400 and then working my way all the way up to 1500 grit. And I did this to give the back of the neck that silky smooth feel where your hand slides up and down the neck rather than sticking to the back of it. The next item on the agenda was to string up the guitar, and one of these days I may do a video on how I set up a Floyd Rose bridge, but in all honesty it's not going to be much different than the other videos that are out there. There really aren't any tips or tricks that I can offer, at least I don't think there is, and that's where I could be wrong. I may make the video and you may watch it and say, wow, I never thought about doing that before. But really the whole process involves stringing up the guitar, adjusting the springs in the tremolo, and then retuning and readjusting springs and going back and forth until you have everything correct. And when I say correct, that means that the strings are in tune and the bridge is perfectly level with the body. So it's kind of a dance between the springs and tuning that before you can get everything just right. I'm a big fan of locking tuners because boy, they sure make stringing up the guitar so much easier. And then once the springs are installed in the tremolo, that really marks the beginning of the setup dance between the springs and strings. I'll coarsely tune the strings at this stage, and I'm not really concerned with getting it perfectly tuned. What I'm really looking to do is get the strings tuned with some tension on the strings, so that I can check the action of the strings over the first fret as well as further back on the fretboard at like the 12th fret or the 17th fret. At this stage, there's a possibility I'm going to have to make some adjustments to get that string action just right. And as you can see here, the action over the first fret is way too high, and the only way to fix it is to sand down that platform that the nut sits on. And then what I like to do is adjust the fine tuners on the Floyd Rose, and I'll screw them all the way in and then back them halfway out, and that's where I'll start as I go to fine tune the strings and get it ready for the final bit of setup work. With the bridge tuners adjusted to the midway point, I'll return to the headstock and use the tuning machines to tune each string as closely as possible. Anyone who has ever set up a Floyd Rose bridge, or really any tremolo bridge for that matter, knows that it's a real dance between tuning the strings and adjusting the tremolo spring tension. But with the Floyd Rose, once you have the strings coarsely tuned, you can then lock down the nut and take the tuning machines out of the equation. Even though I'm just using temporary setup strings here and will replace those eventually, I still feel the need to clip off the excess at the tuners. Then it's just a matter of fine-tuning the strings at the bridge, and usually at this stage there's no need to make any adjustments to the springs because everything should be set up correctly. From there I can test the electronics, make sure that everything is working properly before proceeding on with the rest of the setup process. Okay guys, well that's all the time I've got for this episode, and at this stage the guitar is fully assembled. So what I'm going to do in the next episode, part 17, is the final setup. And hopefully that's just going to be a minimal amount of work, because whenever I build a guitar, I go into it with the idea and the philosophy that as I build the guitar, I want to try to do it in such a way as to minimize how much setup work I'll have to do in the end. So hopefully that'll be the case. We shall soon find out. At any rate, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope I've earned your subscription. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back for more delicious guitar building goodness.